Listen up. The New York Attorney General, Letitia James, just signed a legal document claiming she resides in a Virginia home. But the woman who actually owns that house says she's never even laid eyes on her. This isn't a joke. It's the opening act of what could be 2025's most ironic political scandal. On a quiet Thursday evening, a shaky cell phone video surfaced on X, the kind that usually gets buried in the platform's endless scroll. But this one was different. It showed a man standing on a sidewalk in Norfolk, Virginia, pointing his camera at a tidy two-story house with well-kept shrubs. The footage captured a moment of stark, unyielding clarity. A man stood on the sidewalk, his voice polite but probing, cutting through the evening's stillness like a blade. "Hi, ma'am. Just a quick question," he said, addressing a woman stepping out of a modest two-story home, its white siding and neatly trimmed hedges unremarkable, yet now etched in infamy. "Is this where Letitia James lives?" The woman, middle-aged, her arms crossed with the casual confidence of someone who knows her ground, didn't flinch. "She doesn't live here," she said, her tone flat, unyielding, absolute. "I'm the owner. Been here 10 years. Her words were a guillotine, sharp, clean, and final, slicing through any ambiguity. Letitia James, New York's Attorney General, the woman who'd built her career on rooting out fraud, did not live in that house. At first, the moment seemed trivial, a fleeting curiosity in the vast, churning sea of X, a nothing burger, as the skeptics might dismiss it, destined to be buried under the platform's relentless scroll. But within hours, a bombshell would transform that quiet denial into a firestorm that no amount of spin could extinguish. By nightfall, a legal document surfaced, its crisp pages scanned and shared across X like a virus, spreading faster than any newsroom could track. Dated August 17th, 2023, it was a power of attorney, a sworn statement signed by James herself, declaring that very Virginia home as her principal residence. This wasn't a typo, not a clerical oversight, but a legal vow etched in black and white ink, carrying the weight of perjury if proven false. Claiming a primary residence isn't just paperwork, it's a promise, unlocking tax exemptions, favorable mortgage rates, and financial perks that can save thousands. For the average person, it's a routine form, a bureaucratic checkbox. For Letitia James, it was a gamble, a high-stakes bet that could brand her a hypocrite, or worse, a felon. Enter Elon Musk, not the billionaire dreamer or tech visionary, but the provocateur who wields truth like a flamethrower, unafraid to burn down facades that others dare not touch. He didn't merely notice the video, he amplified it with a single devastating post on X. "Nice house for a NY Attorney General." 7 words, sharp as shrapnel, detonated across the platform, racking up millions of views in hours. The post was a spark in a powder keg, igniting a digital inferno that spread faster than any newsroom could contain. Musk didn't just share the video, he turned it into a weapon, a viral mushroom cloud that shook the foundations of power and sent shockwaves through the corridors of Albany and Washington. X's digital sleuths sprang into action, their screens glowing like beacons in the night. Bloggers, whistleblowers, and ordinary users dove into the abyss of public records, pulling real estate filings, tax documents, and mortgage agreements with relentless precision. Coffee cups piled up, keyboards clattered, and notifications pinged as the evidence mounted. Within 24 hours, the receipts were ironclad. Letitia James had claimed a Virginia home she didn't live in, a lie that contradicted the homeowner's testimony and violated the legal weight of her sworn statement. The documents were shared and reshared across X, each post a nail in the coffin of James's credibility, each thread a chorus of outrage and disbelief. The irony was brutal, a blade twisting in the wound of James's legacy. Letitia James, the self-styled dragon slayer of fraud, had made a career out of chasing liars, those who fudged square footage, who bent the truth for profit, who dared to deceive under her watchful eye. She'd prosecuted with the zeal of a preacher, her speeches ringing with the mantra, "No one is above the law." Her office was a fortress, her name synonymous with accountability, a beacon for those crushed by the powerful. Yet now she stood accused of the very crimes she hunted, her own documents betraying the principles she'd preached. The stakes were merciless. Claiming a false residence wasn't a minor slip. It came with financial benefits that could save thousands, from tax exemptions to mortgage perks. For an ordinary citizen, it might mean a fine or a slap on the wrist. For the Attorney General of New York, it was a potential felony, a crack in the armor of her moral authority that threatened to shatter her empire. To grasp the weight of this moment, you must know the woman at its center. Letitia James was no ordinary figure. She was New York's Attorney General, a titan forged in the crucible of justice, her career a saga of high-profile battles. She'd taken down corrupt landlords, dismantling their empires with surgical precision. She'd battled predatory lenders, freeing families from the shackles of debt. She'd targeted political giants, her investigations a thunderclap that echoed from Brooklyn to Albany. She'd trademarked the word fraud, her speeches a clarion call that rallied the vulnerable and struck fear into the powerful. Her rise was a story of grit and ambition, a black woman from Brooklyn who'd clawed her way to the top, defying odds and breaking barriers. But now, a single document threatened to unravel that legacy, exposing a hypocrisy that cut deeper than any legal charge. How could the woman who prosecuted lies for a living be caught in one herself? The scandal wasn't just about a house in Virginia. It was about the fragility of credibility, the danger of preaching justice while bending its rules. James had built her empire on the promise that no one, not the wealthy, not the powerful, was above the law. She'd stood at podiums, her voice booming, her finger pointed at the guilty, her moral authority unquestioned. But now, the mirror was held to her face, and it reflected a truth she couldn't outrun. The spark had caught, and the fire was spreading, fueled by a digital army and a provocateur who refused to let it die. The question wasn't just whether James would fall, but how far the flames would spread, and who else they might consume. Letitia James's story was one of triumph and tenacity, a narrative that had inspired countless New Yorkers. Born in Brooklyn, she'd grown up in a working-class family, her roots grounded in the struggles of a city that never sleeps. She'd fought her way through law school, her ambition a fire that burned brighter than the challenges she faced. As a public defender, she'd championed the powerless, her courtroom battles a prelude to her rise. As a city councilwoman, she'd tackled housing crises, her voice a beacon for tenants crushed by greed. And as Attorney General, she'd become a force, her investigations a storm that toppled giants. She was a symbol of justice, a warrior for the vulnerable, a woman who'd turned her pain into power. But beneath the armor of righteousness lay a paradox. James had built her empire on the promise of accountability, yet now faced accusations of evading it. Her career was a tapestry of victories, but each thread was now under scrutiny, the flaws in her narrative exposed. She'd prosecuted minor infractions with unrelenting ferocity, fining small business owners into oblivion, jailing landlords over paperwork errors, foreclosing on families for technicalities. Her targets weren't always faceless corporations. They were people, ordinary New Yorkers who'd felt the weight of her gavel. If the Dragon Slayer was a fraud, what did that make her victories? The question hung heavy, a shadow over every case she'd touched. The Virginia document was just the beginning, a crack that revealed deeper fissures. James had sold herself as a champion, But champions don't lie about where they live. They don't bend the rules they enforce, profiting from the system they claim to reform. The betrayal cut deeper than any legal charge, a wound to the soul of a city that had believed in her. New Yorkers had seen her as a beacon, a warrior for the powerless. But now they saw the truth. She'd played the game she'd vowed to end. The spark had ignited a reckoning, and the flames were closing in. On a gray morning in Washington, D.C., the House Judiciary Committee convened, the air thick with the promise of a reckoning. The Capitol's marble halls, polished to a gleam, seemed to lean in, as if sensing the drama unfolding within. This wasn't a hearing. It was a coliseum, a battleground where truth and power would collide in a spectacle that would shake the nation. At the center sat Elon Musk, not as a billionaire or tech mogul, but as a special representative for judicial reform, handpicked by an administration desperate for clarity in a city choked by lies. His binder, labeled Exhibit A, lay open before him, its pages a roadmap to justice or retribution, depending on where you stood. The partisan lines were drawn before a word was spoken. The room buzzed with tension, lawmakers fidgeting, aides whispering, cameras humming softly. A Democratic congresswoman from California, her face a mask of performative skepticism, fired the first salvo. "Mr. Musk," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, "we hope this committee won't become a stage for political theater." The words were a preemptive strike, a warning to keep the proceedings tame. Musk didn't flinch. "I'm sorry, Congresswoman," he replied, his tone dry as desert ash. "Did you want to borrow my spotlight?" The room erupted. Gasps from the press gallery, chairs creaking, a coffee cup hitting a table with a loud clatter. The Congresswoman's face froze, her rehearsed poise shattered by Musk's surgical retort. The press scribbled furiously, their pens racing to capture the moment. Musk wasn't here to play games. He was here to dismantle a myth, to expose the cracks in a system that shielded its own. "The justice system has been weaponized," he declared, his voice steady but searing, each word a precision strike. "When the person holding the sword forgets they're bound by law, it's time to ask who sharpened the blade." The target was unmistakable. Letitia James, the Attorney General who preached accountability while, it seemed, dodging it herself. James sat across the room, her posture rigid, her face a carefully constructed mask of control. But her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease, a crack in the fortress she'd built. The Colosseum was ready, and the gladiators were armed. Musk with evidence, James with defiance, and a nation watching, waiting to see who would fall. The accusation hung like a storm cloud, heavy with the promise of revelations that would shake Capitol Hill to its core. Musk struck first, unveiling a ghost from 1983, a mortgage agreement from Queens, New York, its yellowed pages a relic of a bygone era. It falsely listed a 24-year-old Letitia James as married to her father to secure a loan. The audacity was staggering, the implications profound. The document wasn't just a curiosity. It was a lie etched in legal ink, a deception that had gone uncorrected for 4 decades. James, her composure a fortress, dismissed it as a bank error, insignificant at the time. Her voice was measured, but the room sensed weakness. Musk wasn't buying it. "You're New York's top law enforcement officer," he said, his voice slicing through the haze like a blade. "For 4 decades, you never corrected a document that said you were married to your father?" The silence was suffocating, a living thing that pressed against the walls. James hesitated, her eyes flicking to her counsel, a sharp-suited man with a furrowed brow who whispered urgently, sliding a note across the table. Musk's stare was unrelenting, a laser burning through her defenses. This wasn't a clerical oversight. It was a legacy unraveling, a crack in the foundation of her moral authority. The room held its breath, lawmakers exchanging glances, the press scribbling faster. But Musk wasn't done. He pivoted to a Brooklyn property James had owned since 2001, a 5-unit apartment building that told a story of its own. For 17 years, James had declared that building as having 4 units in every filing, despite its certificate of occupancy clearly stating 5. Why? Because 4 units qualify for homeowner benefits, tax breaks, mortgage relief, while 5 units are classified as commercial, ineligible for such perks. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a deliberate pattern, a deception that saved James thousands over nearly 2 decades. The evidence was damning, a timeline of filings that stretched from 2001 to 2018, each one a lie, each one a betrayal of the laws she swore to uphold. Musk's voice sharpened, each word a hammer strike. This isn't a math error. It's a strategy. James's defense was thin, her voice strained as she leaned into the microphone. I lived in 1 unit, she said, her words a desperate attempt to thread the needle. Musk pounced, his tone calm but lethal. So which is it, Miss James? Do you live there or does it pay for itself? The contradiction hung like smoke, choking the room. James' counsel scribbled furiously, their faces pale, their whispers a desperate hum. The evidence was a noose, tightening with every word, and the Colosseum roared with the anticipation of justice or retribution. This wasn't just about documents, it was about hypocrisy, about a woman who'd built her career on accountability now facing the mirror of her own deceit. Then came the masterstroke, the revelation that turned the hearing into a seismic event. Musk unveiled a financial web tying James to Soros-backed intermediaries, a network of organizations that pulsed with hidden influence. When your salary comes from taxpayers, but your loyalty is bought by donors, you don't serve the law, you serve the purse. The accusation was a thunderclap, reverberating through the chamber like a shockwave. James was part of a coordinated network of prosecutors, hand-picked to target political foes while shielding their own, a machine oiled by money and ambition. The room stirred, lawmakers leaning forward, some with dawning realization, others with barely concealed panic. The network wasn't a conspiracy theory, it was a map, its lines connecting organizations like the Tide Center to funding streams that flowed through political campaigns and prosecutorial agendas. James's loyalty, Musk argued, wasn't to the people of New York, but to the donors who'd underwritten her rise. The implications were staggering. A justice system not driven by law, but by power, its enforcers hand-picked to serve an agenda. The accusation cut to the core of James's identity, challenging the very foundation of her moral authority. A Democratic congresswoman objected, her voice sharp but defensive, sensing the danger of Musk's claims. Mr. Musk, are you implying or implying any prosecutor with nonprofit support is compromised? She asked, her words a desperate attempt to deflect. Musk's reply was devastating, his calm belying the weight of his words. If truth feels like a spectacle, maybe the problem isn't the spotlight, it's what it's shining on. Her objection fizzled, her face a mask of frustration, her words dissolving into the chamber's tension. This wasn't just about a house in Virginia or a building in Brooklyn. It was about a system rigged to protect its own, a web of influence that stretched far beyond one woman. James' composure cracked, her arms crossed tightly, her counsel's whispers now a frantic buzz. The Colosseum was no longer a metaphor. It was a reality, and the crowd, Lawmakers, press, and the public watching via C-SPAN sensed blood. The tide was turning, and James's fortress was crumbling under the weight of truth. The question wasn't just whether James had lied, but whether the system she served was complicit in her deception. The hearing reached its zenith with a dagger from the shadows, a leaked recording of James's staff admitting to fraud. "Just write 4. Don't mention the 5th unit," a tired voice said, captured in a dimly lit kitchen, the words casual but damning. The audio was a death knell, echoing through the chamber like a gunshot. James froze, her counsel sliding a single note across the table. "Stay quiet." But silence couldn't bury the truth. The spin was dead. The evidence was alive, screaming for justice. The press gallery erupted, reporters typing furiously, phones glowing like fireflies under desks. Outside, protesters gathered, their signs bold and unyielding. "No more double standards. Truth over power." A lone voice chanted, "Justice!" and the crowd joined, a rising tide that shook the Capitol's steps. Congressman Jim Jordan, sleeves rolled up like a wrestler stepping into the ring, took the floor. He revealed a private investigative report, funded by Musk's civic reform initiative, that confirmed the fraud. Decades of misrepresentations, from a Virginia home to a Brooklyn building. The report was a sledgehammer, its findings undeniable. James had lied, repeatedly, to secure financial benefits she wasn't entitled to. The Federal Department of Justice opened a criminal inquiry, targeting fraudulent filings, misrepresentation of ownership, and improper access to homeowner assistance programs. James's law license was suspended, a stunning blow to the woman who'd wielded legal authority like a crown. Her office's past prosecutions, once a point of pride, now faced scrutiny as defendants from years past, landlords, small business owners, ordinary people, prepared to challenge their convictions, arguing that a flawed enforcer had tainted justice itself. The inquiry wasn't just about James. It was about the system she represented, a system now forced to confront its own complicity. The fallout was a tsunami, relentless and unforgiving. Journalists who once hailed James as a hero, a warrior against corruption, now questioned her motives. Had she weaponized justice to distract from her own crimes? Had her crusades been a performance, a way to burnish her image while hiding her own flaws? A class action lawsuit swelled, led by defendants she'd prosecuted for similar offenses, people who'd lost businesses, homes, and livelihoods to her unrelenting crusade. The hunter was now the prey, her legacy unraveling like thread pulled from a tapestry. The public watched, their trust eroding with each revelation, their belief in James' righteousness replaced by a bitter sense of betrayal. This wasn't just about Letitia James. It was about the people she'd pursued, the lives upended by her crusade. For years, she'd prosecuted minor infractions with the ferocity of a general, branding herself a protector of the vulnerable. She'd fined small business owners into oblivion, jailed landlords over paperwork errors, and foreclosed on families for technicalities. Her targets weren't faceless corporations. They were people, ordinary New Yorkers who'd felt the weight of her gavel. A Brooklyn landlord, prosecuted for misstating rental income, lost his building and his family's savings. A single mother, fined for a clerical error on a loan application, faced eviction while James stood at a podium, preaching justice. A small business owner, targeted for a zoning violation, shuttered his shop, his dreams crushed under the weight of her fines. If the Dragon Slayer was a fraud, what did that make her victories? The question hung heavy, a shadow over every case she'd touched. The human cost was staggering. Families bankrupted, businesses shuttered, lives derailed by a woman who'd claimed to champion them. She'd sold herself as a protector, but protectors don't lie about where they live. They don't hide units to save thousands. They don't wield justice as a shield for their own sins. The betrayal cut deeper than any legal charge, a wound to the soul of a city that had believed in her. New Yorkers had seen James as a beacon, a warrior for the powerless, but now they saw the truth. She'd played the game she'd vowed to end, profiting from the system she claimed to reform. The scandal wasn't just about documents or dollars. It was about trust shattered, about a woman who'd preached righteousness while practicing deceit. The human cost wasn't just financial. It was emotional, a collective disillusionment that left a city grappling with the fragility of its heroes. James's fall exposed the cracks in the system she served, a system that had elevated her, celebrated her, and now faced its own reckoning. The question wasn't just whether James was guilty, but whether the system was complicit in her rise and her fall. In a final act of defiance, James faced the cameras in a stark studio, stripped of the trappings of power. No podium, no flags, just a woman and a microphone. "I once believed justice was a double-edged sword," she said, her voice cracking in carefully rehearsed places, a performance calibrated for sympathy. "I never thought I'd be cut by the blade I carried." The words were meant to evoke pity, to paint her as a tragic figure undone by circumstance, a warrior felled by her own ideals. But they rang hollow, a shadow of the firebrand who'd once roared, "No one is above the law." She'd wielded that sword like a crown, a symbol of her untouchable authority, only to be undone by her own hubris. The performance couldn't erase the evidence, the Virginia document, the Brooklyn filings, the leaked audio, the financial web. It couldn't undo the human cost, the lives she'd shattered while claiming to protect them. It couldn't restore the trust she'd betrayed, the faith she'd squandered. The studio was silent, the cameras unflinching. And when James finished, the screen didn't fade. It stopped, as if the story itself refused to grant her a graceful exit. Letitia James's fall wasn't about a house in Virginia or a building in Brooklyn. It was about hypocrisy laid bare, credibility shattered, and a system forced to confront its own lies. Her legacy, once a beacon of justice, lay in ruins, a cautionary tale for those who dare to preach while deceiving. The truth doesn't need a hero. It needs a spark, a voice unafraid to speak, and a world ready to listen. For Letitia James, that spark became a fire, and it burned everything she'd built to the ground. The Colosseum had spoken, and its verdict was final. The Dragon Slayer was slain, not by her enemies, but by the truth she'd claimed to serve.